A stranger zipped her wedding dress. Mafia boss whispered, "Your groom's not coming, little dove. I am." 23-year-old Angela Fiore stood in front of the mirror in her wedding dress, unaware of what was about to happen. In 2 minutes, a stranger would zip up her gown and change her life forever. In 2 hours, she'd be on a private jet, heading to New York. And the secret she'd been hiding for 2 years? It would either save her or destroy everything. But right now, Angela Fiore was just a bride, standing in the bridal suite of the Charleston Grand Belmont Hotel, struggling with the zipper of her wedding dress and dreaming of the man she was about to marry. Angela Fiore, 23, stared at her reflection in the mirror. Long chestnut hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, her honey-brown eyes bright with anticipation. The vintage lace wedding dress hugged her curves perfectly, the off-shoulder design revealing her delicate collarbones. In less than an hour, she would become Angela Harris. She reached awkwardly behind her back, trying and failing to grasp the zipper that ran along her spine. Her full lips curved into a frustrated pout. "Miranda, can you help me with this?" She laughed, the sound bright with nervous excitement. "I can't reach it." Her best friend sat on the velvet settee by the window, scrolling through her phone. Miranda glanced up with a warm smile. "1 second, let me just finish this text." Angela turned back to the mirror, her cheeks flushed pink beneath her olive complexion. Her heart fluttered at the thought, a mixture of excitement and something else she couldn't quite name. "I'm so nervous," she admitted, pressing a hand to her stomach. "Do you think he's the one? I mean, we've been together for a year now, and he's been so patient with me, waiting until we're married. Not every man would understand that." Miranda made a muffled sound. "Miranda, seriously, the zipper—" Angela's words died in her throat. A hand touched the small of her back. Not Miranda's delicate fingers. These were large, masculine, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. The zipper began to slide upward, slowly, deliberately, each inch of movement accompanied by the ghost of fingertips brushing against her bare skin. Goosebumps erupted across Angela's flesh. A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air in the room. The touch was almost sensual, intentional, like whoever was behind her wanted her to feel every millimeter of contact. A breathless laugh escaped her lips. "Miranda, are you trying to get me in the mood for my wedding night already? Save some of that energy for—" Her eyes lifted to the mirror, and the world stopped. Ice blue eyes stared back at her. Not Miranda's warm brown. Ice blue. A man's eyes. A stranger's eyes. Watching her like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. He towered over her at 6'3", broad shoulders straining against a perfectly tailored black suit worn over a crisp white shirt, open at the collar to reveal a hint of tanned skin. His hair was dark and wavy, swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance painting, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A neat dark beard framed his sharp jaw, and an expensive watch glinted on his wrist as his fingers completed their journey up her spine. But it was his eyes that made her blood run cold, pale as a frozen lake in winter. They stared at her reflection with an intensity that stripped her bare, seeing through the white lace and pearls to something underneath. The zipper fastened at the nape of her neck with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Who are you?" Angela's voice came out as a strangled whisper. She spun around, pressing herself against the vanity table, her eyes wide with terror. "What are you doing in here?" The stranger smiled. It was a cold expression, calculated, revealing nothing of warmth or humor. His voice was low and controlled when he spoke, the kind that didn't need volume to command attention. "Your groom's not coming, little dove. I am." Angela's heart slammed against her ribs. "What are you talking about? Where's Johnny? What did you do to him?" She pressed harder against the vanity, her fingers gripping the edge until her knuckles turned white. "Get away from me! I'll scream!" The stranger didn't move, didn't flinch. If anything, his smile grew colder. "I must say I'm pleasantly surprised." His ice blue eyes traveled down her body, unhurried, appreciative, taking in the delicate lace, the soft curves, the trembling fullness of her lips. "My bride is even more innocent than I expected. Such purity, such untouched beauty." The smile widened a fraction. "I'm a lucky man." Ice water flooded Angela's veins. She was certain he could see her pulse racing through the lace. "Your bride?" The words came out high, panicked. "I don't know who you are, but I'm marrying Johnny Harris. Today, in less than an hour. So whatever sick joke this is—" "Miranda!" Angela screamed, darting toward the door that connected to the adjoining room. "Miranda, help!" She burst through the door and stumbled to a halt, her white heels skidding on the polished floor. 4 men in black suits stood in the room. They were massive, walls of muscle with earpieces and cold professional expressions. One of them had his hand clamped over Miranda's mouth, her eyes wide with terror above his thick fingers. She was struggling, but against a man that size, her efforts were useless. Angela whirled back to face the stranger, who had followed her with that same unhurried, predatory grace. His hands were in his pockets now, his posture relaxed, as if kidnapping brides was something he did every Tuesday. Her voice cracked. "What do you want? Johnny!" She screamed the name toward the door. "Johnny, help me!" One of the guards stepped forward, speaking in a clipped professional tone. "Mr. Mancini, the jet is ready for takeoff. We should be at the airfield within 30 minutes. He glanced at Miranda, who was still struggling. "Are we taking both of them?" The man, Mancini, didn't take his eyes off Angela. Those ice-blue irises studied her the way a collector might examine a new acquisition, cataloguing every detail, every flaw, every possibility. "No." His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Just the bride." "No!" Angela lunged for the door, but one of the guards caught her around the waist. She kicked, screamed, her white gown billowing around her like a cloud, her chestnut hair flying wild. "Let me go! I'm getting married today. You can't do this. I don't even know you." Her heel connected with the guard's shin, and he grunted in pain. For one glorious moment, his grip loosened. Angela bolted for the door. She made it exactly 3 steps. A hand like iron closed around her wrist, spinning her around. Before she could scream, the world tilted, and suddenly she was airborne, thrown over a broad shoulder like a sack of flour. The scent of expensive cologne and something darker, cedar, sandalwood, danger, filled her lungs as she pounded her fists against his back. "Put me down!" She kicked, thrashed, fought with everything she had. "Someone help! This is kidnapping! Somebody call the police!" Raphael Mancini walked out of the hotel with the screaming bride over his shoulder, his stride unhurried, his expression bored, as if her protests were nothing more than background noise. 3 minutes later, they were in the back of a black SUV with tinted windows. Angela sat pressed against the door, as far from him as the confined space would allow. Her mascara had run in dark rivers down her cheeks, ruining the careful makeup that had taken 2 hours to perfect. Her carefully styled hair was a mess of loose pins and tangled waves. The wedding dress that had taken her 8 months to afford was wrinkled and stained with dirt from the parking lot. Raphael Mancini sat beside her, calm as still water, one ankle crossed over his knee. The overhead light caught the sharp angles of his face, the strong brow, the aristocratic nose, the dark beard that somehow made his blue eyes even more striking. He looked like a man on his way to a business meeting, not someone who had just committed a federal crime in broad daylight. "This is actually kidnapping," Angela spat, her voice raw from screaming. "Do you understand that? You just took me from my own wedding, in front of witnesses. You're insane. You're a Mafia wannabe psychopath, and when Johnny finds out—" Raphael Mancini reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Without a word, he tossed it into her lap. Angela stared at it for a moment, then tore it open with trembling fingers. Photographs spilled out onto her ruined dress. She picked one up and her heart stopped. Johnny. Her Johnny. The man she was supposed to marry today. He was kissing a woman, a beautiful brunette in a red dress, outside what looked like a hotel. In another photo, they were walking hand in hand. In another, they were climbing into a taxi together, his hand on her lower back in a gesture Angela knew all too well. "What is this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Her honey-brown eyes, the eyes her mother used to call angel eyes, filled with tears. Who is she? Raphael's gaze was on her, watching her pain with clinical detachment. When he spoke, his voice was dismissive, almost bored. She's nobody. He shrugged, as if the woman in the photos meant less than nothing. Just a girl your precious Johnny has been having an affair with. One of many, I'm told. Angela's fingers tightened on the photograph, crumpling the image of Johnny's betrayal. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she swallowed the sob that threatened to escape. Raphael leaned forward, his eyes locking onto her honey-brown ones with sudden, predatory intensity. But you, his voice dropped, each word deliberate. You, Angela Fiore, are far more interesting. He pulled out a slim folder from beside him, flipping it open with casual elegance. 23 years old. Works as a cook at a cafe on King Street. Has exactly $1,043 in her bank account and $17,000 in credit card debt, most of it from supporting a boyfriend who, as you can see, has been spending his time elsewhere. He paused, letting the words sink in. And from what I understand, while you were saving yourself for him, he was sleeping with at least 3 other women. The photographs fell from Angela's numb fingers, scattering across the floor of the SUV. Why? Her voice cracked. Why are you telling me this? What does any of this have to do with you? Raphael studied her for a long moment, those ice-blue eyes revealing nothing. I've been looking for you for 2 years, Angela. Tracked you from New York to Miami to Charleston. You're a hard woman to find. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. But I always find what I'm looking for. And today, I found you just in time. In time for what? Angela demanded, anger finally overtaking her fear. Why were you looking for me? I don't know you. I've never met you. I don't even... Your father. The words cut through her protests like a blade. David Fiore. He was my accountant for 15 years. Raphael's jaw tightened beneath his dark beard, the first crack in his icy composure. And before he disappeared and conveniently died, he stole $10 million from me. Angela's blood ran cold. She shook her head slowly, her chestnut waves swaying with the motion. No. No, that's impossible. My father left us when I was 12. I haven't spoken to him since. My mother died because of him, because of the stress, the heartbreak, the bills he left behind. Her voice rose, cracking with old pain. I have nothing to do with him. I don't know anything about any money. You expect me to believe that? Raphael's voice was quiet, dangerous. No one steals from me, Angela, and those who try pay the price. I don't know anything, Angela shouted, fire blazing in her honey-brown eyes despite the tears. You have the wrong person. You're on the wrong trail. Where are you taking me? What are you going to do? Raphael let the silence stretch, his eyes traveling over her slowly, deliberately, from the smeared mascara on her cheeks to the white lace clinging to her curves. When he spoke, his voice dropped to something low and intimate that made her skin prickle with warning. I'm taking you home. My home. You'll stay where I can see you. He leaned closer, and Angela pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering. Either you give me my money, or what? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Raphael reached out, his finger tracing the path of the zipper he had pulled up just minutes ago, from the small of her back to the nape of her neck. Angela shivered, hating her body for responding to his touch even as fear coiled in her stomach. Or I'll unzip this dress the same way I zipped it up, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. And you'll become my little toy until I get bored of playing with you. Angela's hand flew toward his face. He caught her wrist inches from his cheek, his grip like iron. Those ice-blue eyes glittered with something dark, amusement maybe, or anticipation. You don't understand who I am, do you, little dove? His voice was soft, almost tender, which made it infinitely more terrifying. I've destroyed men for a fraction of what your father stole. But beyond the money, he pulled her closer until their faces were inches apart. I don't forgive betrayal. Raphael Mancini lets no one escape unpunished. Angela yanked her wrist free, her chest heaving. Miranda will tell someone. Johnny will call the police. People saw you take me. They'll look for me. They'll find me. Raphael laughed. It was a low, dark sound that sent chills racing down her spine. No one is coming for you, Angela. He settled back into his seat, straightening his cuffs with casual elegance. Your friend will keep her mouth shut if she values her life. And your precious Johnny? Another cold smile. He was happy to take my money to look the other way. As for the police, let's just say I own most of them. Angela stared at him, horror and fury warring in her chest. You're a monster. Perhaps. Raphael's frozen blue eyes met her honey-brown ones, and for a moment something flickered behind the frost, something that looked almost like hunger. But I'm the monster who owns you now, little dove. He reached out, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek with surprising gentleness. Angela flinched at the contact, but she didn't look away. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. You're mine, he whispered to her ear, and the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. The SUV pulled onto the highway, and Angela watched the hotel disappear in the rearview mirror, along with her wedding, her dreams, and the life she thought she knew. Somewhere inside her, beneath the fear and the grief and the humiliation, a spark of fury ignited. Raphael Mancini thought he had captured a helpless dove. He thought she would bend, break, submit. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The private jet was nothing like Angela had ever seen before. She stood frozen at the top of the air stairs, her ruined wedding dress trailing behind her like a ghost of the life she'd lost an hour ago. The interior stretched before her in cream leather and polished mahogany, soft lighting casting everything in a warm glow that felt obscene given the circumstances. Who is this man? Her entire apartment could fit inside this cabin. Move! Raphael's voice came from behind her, low and impatient. His hand pressed against the small of her back, guiding her forward with a touch that was somehow both impersonal and possessive at once. Angela stumbled down the aisle and chose a seat by the window, as far from him as possible, pressing herself against the leather. Raphael settled into the seat across from her. An aisle separated them, but it might as well have been inches for how small the space suddenly felt. A flight attendant appeared from the front cabin. The woman was stunning, blonde, leggy, and young enough to make Angela feel like a mess in her dirt-stained wedding dress. Mr. Mancini? The attendant's voice was breathy, almost reverent, as she leaned toward Raphael with a smile that showed too many teeth. It's so good to have you on board again. Raphael looked up from his phone, and something shifted in his expression. The cold mask softened into something almost charming as he returned her smile, his gaze traveling down her figure with unhurried appreciation. Linda. His voice dropped to something warmer, more intimate. You're looking lovely as always. Heat crept up Angela's neck. Not embarrassment, but irritation. The audacity of this man, flirting with the help while his kidnapping victim sat 3 feet away. Linda practically glowed under his attention, her cheeks flushing pink. What can I get for you, Mr. Mancini? The usual? Please. Raphael's gaze lingered on her a moment longer before sliding to Angela, the warmth vanishing like someone had flipped a switch. And for our guest, cold water. The dismissal in his tone made Angela's blood boil. She watched Linda sway back toward the galley and had to resist the urge to roll her eyes. Anything you want, Mr. Mancini, Angela muttered under her breath, her voice dripping with mockery. Does that include kidnapping innocent women? Is that on the menu too? The plane began to taxi, and Angela forced herself to focus on the window. She could feel Raphael's gaze on her, heavy, assessing, like a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the chase. You know, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, I have to wonder something. Raphael didn't respond, but she could tell he was listening by the way his fingers stilled on his phone. Do you personally hunt down everyone who steals from you? Angela turned to face him, lifting her chin in defiance, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Flying around in your private jet, kidnapping people from their weddings, seems inefficient for a man of your resources. Something flickered in those pale eyes. Amusement, maybe, or annoyance, With him, it was impossible to tell. "That tongue of yours?" His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but there was an edge beneath the silk that made her stomach tighten. "It's going to get you in trouble." Angela refused to look away. "You didn't answer my question." Raphael studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his words were clipped, precise. "The answer is no." He set his phone aside, giving her his full attention in a way that made her want to shrink back into her seat. "I have people for that. Collecting debts, tracking down thieves, that's what I pay them for. But you—" He cut her off, leaning forward slightly, and Angela felt the air between them thicken. "You, I came for personally." The words hung in the space between them, heavy with implication. Angela's throat went dry, and she hated herself for the way her pulse quickened, not entirely from fear. Linda returned with their drinks, breaking the tension like a bubble popping. She handed Raphael a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, her fingers brushing against his with obvious intention, before setting a glass of ice water on Angela's armrest without so much as a glance. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Mancini?" Linda's voice was honey-sweet, her body angled toward him like a flower seeking sun. Raphael took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving Angela's face. "That will be all, Linda." The attendant's smile faltered slightly at the dismissal, but she recovered quickly, retreating to the front cabin with one last lingering look. Angela grabbed her water and took a long drink, if only to have something to do with her hands. The ice clinked against the glass, the only sound in the cabin besides the steady hum of the engines. "Take a good look." The words came out before she could stop them, sharp and brittle. "Because tomorrow you won't see me. I'll escape. First chance I get, I'm gone." She expected anger, maybe even violence. What she got instead was worse. Raphael laughed. It was a low, dark sound that seemed to vibrate through her chest, and his smile was the kind that made her think of wolves, all teeth and hunger, and barely contained danger. "Good thing you reminded me." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the liquid catch the light. "I'll be sure to handcuff you to the bed tonight." Angela's face flushed hot, fury and something else she refused to name burning beneath her skin. She opened her mouth to fire back, to tell him exactly where he could shove his handcuffs, but exhaustion hit her like a wave. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright for the past 2 hours was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that made her eyelids heavy. The stress of the day, the wedding that never happened, the kidnapping, Johnny's betrayal, it all crashed over her at once, dragging her down into darkness. She turned away from him, pressing her forehead against the cool window glass, and let her eyes fall closed. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of another response. She wouldn't give him anything. "I'll escape," she promised herself as sleep pulled her under. "I'll find a way out of this. He can't keep me forever." The last thing she felt before unconsciousness claimed her was the weight of his gaze on her skin, watching her even in surrender. "Wake up, little dove." The voice pulled her from the darkness, low, commanding, too close. Angela's eyes flew open, and she jerked back instinctively, her pulse spiking. Raphael's face was inches from hers, those pale eyes bright with something that might have been amusement. He'd crouched down beside her seat, one hand resting on the armrest near her hip, close enough that she could smell cedar and whiskey on his breath. "We're home." His lips curved into that dangerous half-smile. "Time to meet your new cage." Angela pushed herself upright, her neck aching from the awkward position she'd slept in. Through the window, she could see a sprawling estate lit up against the darkness, all glass and stone and modern angles. 2 guards stood at the iron gates they'd just passed through, their silhouettes stark against the floodlights. More security than she'd seen at some government buildings. This isn't a house, she realized, as the SUV, when had they gotten into a car, pulled up to the front entrance. This is a fortress. The driver opened her door before she could gather her thoughts, and Angela stepped out on unsteady legs, her wedding dress dragging across the gravel driveway. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of chlorine and freshly cut grass. A man stood waiting at the front door, and Angela had to tilt her head back to take in all of him. He was enormous. easily 6'5", with shoulders like a linebacker and hands that looked capable of crushing skulls. His dark suit strained against muscles that seemed almost comical in their size, but his face, when he looked at Raphael, split into a grin that transformed him from terrifying to almost friendly. "Boss?" The giant's voice was surprisingly soft for a man his size, with a hint of an Italian accent. His eyes slid to Angela, taking in the wedding dress, the smeared makeup, the tangled hair, and his eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. "I didn't know you were getting married, boss. Would have been nice to get an invitation." There was genuine hurt in his tone, and Angela might have laughed if she wasn't standing in a stranger's driveway after being kidnapped from her own wedding. Raphael's hand pressed against her lower back, steering her toward the door. "She's not my bride yet, Oscar. Yet." The word sent ice down Angela's spine. She shot Raphael a look that could have melted steel, her eyes blazing with fury. He caught the look and smiled. Actually smiled, the bastard, as if her anger was the most entertaining thing he'd seen all day. "By the way," Raphael continued, guiding her past Oscar and into a foyer that was all marble and modern art, "Angela is a cook. I'm sure she'll make wonderful meals during her stay with us." Something snapped inside her. "Oh, absolutely." Angela's voice was sugar-sweet, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "I'll cook for you every single day. I'll just add a special ingredient to every dish." She met Raphael's eyes without flinching. Poison. Behind them, Oscar made a choking sound that might have been a laugh quickly disguised as a cough. Raphael's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. "Oscar." Raphael's voice was cool, controlled. "Show our guest to her room." The giant stepped forward, his massive frame somehow managing to look almost gentle as he gestured toward a sweeping staircase. "This way, miss." Angela followed him up the stairs, acutely aware of Raphael's gaze burning into her back with every step. The hallway they entered was long and lined with doors, each one identical. Oscar stopped at the last door on the right, pushing it open to reveal a room that made Angela's breath catch. A king-sized bed draped in white linens, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of manicured gardens. A bathroom with a jacuzzi tub. It smelled of fresh flowers, and soft lamplight cast everything in a warm glow. It was nicer than any hotel she'd ever stayed in, nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. And it was still a prison. Oscar lingered in the doorway, his bulk blocking most of the light from the hallway. He glanced over his shoulder as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer to Angela with a conspiratorial expression. "Between us," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I'm on a diet. The boss has me eating nothing but grilled chicken and vegetables." He made a face like someone had just told him his dog died. "If you could maybe help me out? Cook something that tastes good but won't make me fat?" Angela stared at him, her mouth falling open slightly. Of all the things she'd expected from her captor's henchman, diet advice was not on the list. "Get out!" The words came out flat, exhausted. "Do you have any idea what your boss just did to me? He kidnapped me from my wedding. I'm being held here against my will." Oscar's expression shifted to something almost sympathetic, but he didn't move from the doorway. "Italian women," he said, as if that explained everything. "My mother says they're all feisty. Fire in the blood, she calls it." He shrugged those massive shoulders. "You'll settle in. They all do." Before Angela could ask what the hell that meant, he stepped back and closed the door behind him. She heard the distinct click of a lock engaging, and her stomach dropped. She was trapped. Angela moved through the room like a woman in a trance, checking every possible exit. The windows, locked, and 3 stories up with nothing but a straight drop to the stone patio below. The bathroom, no window at all, just gleaming tile and that ridiculous jacuzzi. The door, solid wood, and when she pressed her ear against it, she could hear footsteps in the hallway. Guards, probably. This was supposed to be my wedding night, she thought, sinking onto the edge of the bed. The mattress gave beneath her weight, impossibly soft, and she wanted to scream at the irony of it all. I was supposed to be with Johnny right now. I was supposed to be happy. But Johnny had never loved her. Johnny had taken money to look the other way while a monster took her, and now she was here, locked in a gilded cage, wearing a wedding dress that would never serve its purpose. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry, not here, not where he might see. A movement outside the window caught her attention. Angela rose slowly, drawn toward the glass despite herself. The gardens below were lit by soft landscape lighting, revealing a pool that glowed an ethereal blue in the darkness. And there, emerging from the water, was Raphael. She forgot to breathe. He was shirtless, water streaming down a torso that looked carved from marble, broad shoulders, narrow waist, abs that gleamed in the underwater lights. His dark hair was slicked back from his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw, those dangerous pale eyes. 3 men in suits stood at the pool's edge, clearly waiting for him. Raphael grabbed a towel from a nearby lounger, drying himself with quick, efficient movements as he spoke to them. Angela couldn't hear the words through the glass, but she could see his body language, the set of his shoulders, the commanding gestures, the way the other men practically vibrated with attention. He was giving orders. Even half-naked and dripping wet, he radiated authority like a physical force. "He's beautiful," some traitorous part of her brain whispered, dangerous and cruel and absolutely beautiful. And then, as if he could feel her watching, Raphael looked up. His eyes found her window with unerring precision, and even from 3 stories up, Angela could see the smile that curved his lips. Small, knowing, like he'd caught her doing something she shouldn't. Heat flooded her face, hot and immediate and mortifying. She stumbled backward, away from the window, her pulse racing. "Why am I blushing?" Her hands flew to her burning cheeks. "I'm not attracted to him. I can't be. He's a monster. He kidnapped me." But her body didn't seem to care. Her body had seen the water sliding down those muscles, the confident way he moved, the raw power that radiated from every inch of him, and it had responded in ways that made her want to crawl out of her own skin. Angela sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. "Get it together," she told herself fiercely. "He's the enemy." But as she lay back on the too-soft bed, staring up at the ceiling of her beautiful prison, she couldn't shake the image of him from her mind. Those cold eyes finding her in the darkness, that knowing smile. Like he knew exactly what she was thinking. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, a small voice whispered, "What if I can't escape?" Angela squeezed her eyes shut, pushing the thought away. She would escape. She had to, because the alternative was unthinkable, wasn't it? 3 hours. Angela had been pounding on this door for 3 hours straight. Her fists ached, her throat was raw from screaming, and her knuckles had turned an angry shade of red. "Let me out!" She slammed her palm against the wood. "You can't keep me locked up like an animal!" Angela pressed her forehead against the cool wood, breathing hard. Her wedding dress hung heavy on her frame, the once pristine lace now wrinkled and stained with the dirt from yesterday's nightmare. The lock clicked. Angela stumbled backward, her pulse spiking. The door swung open, and Raphael stood in the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame, looking completely unbothered by the chaos she'd been unleashing. He'd changed into a dark grey shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms corded with muscle. All that noise. His gaze swept over her disheveled state, the stained dress, the mascara tracks on her cheeks, the wild tangle of her chestnut hair. Something flickered in his expression, amusement maybe, or satisfaction. "I assume you want to have dinner with me?" Angela's mouth fell open. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't even on the list. "Dinner? Are you insane? I want to leave." Raphael pushed off the doorframe and turned toward the staircase without acknowledging her demand. "Dinner is ready. Come down." He descended the stairs without looking back, moving with that infuriating confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. Angela stood frozen in the doorway, her hands curling into fists at her sides. The audacity, the absolute audacity. But her stomach chose that moment to growl, loudly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything since before the wedding, before everything fell apart. Pride or food. Pride or food. Her stomach growled again, more insistently this time. Angela followed him down, her heels clicking against the marble stairs with each angry step. The dining room opened before her. A long table that could easily seat 20, set with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the light from a chandelier overhead. Candles flickered in silver holders. The smell of food made her traitorous stomach clench with hunger. Raphael pulled out a chair at the head of the table. Angela hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to refuse, to fight. But she was starving, and she needed her strength if she was going to escape. She sat, refusing to thank him for the courtesy. Raphael took the seat immediately to her left, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that his arm nearly brushed hers when he reached for his napkin. Oscar sat across from her, his massive frame somehow squeezed into a chair that looked comically small beneath him. His scarred face would have been terrifying if not for the sweet, almost boyish smile he offered her. "Let's begin." Raphael unfolded his napkin. "Enjoy your meal." "Boss," Oscar's deep voice stopped him. "We pray first." Raphael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he set down his napkin. Oscar extended his enormous hand, wrapping it around Raphael's with surprising gentleness. Then he reached across the table toward Angela, his palm up, waiting. She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a loaded weapon. Raphael's hand moved toward hers. Angela yanked it back so fast she nearly knocked over her water glass. "Don't touch me!" The words came out sharp, brittle, edged with all the fear and fury she'd been swallowing for the past day. Oscar leaned toward Raphael, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that Angela could absolutely still hear. "Boss, Italian women are like that. My mother still yells at my father. They've been married 40 years. Raphael's gaze never left Angela's face. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered with dark amusement. "That explains your trauma." Oscar simply clasped his own hands together and bowed his head, apparently unbothered by the insult. "Dear Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for not letting the boss kill anyone today, that we know of. Please help me survive this diet. And please give our new guest patience because she's going to need it." He crossed himself with a flourish. "Amen." Before Angela could process whatever the hell that was, a young woman emerged from the kitchen carrying a large tureen. She was beautiful. Olive skin, dark curls, curves that her simple black dress did nothing to hide. Oscar's entire demeanor transformed. His scarred face softened, his dark eyes going warm and almost dreamy as he watched the woman ladle soup into his bowl. He looked like a lovesick puppy who'd just spotted his favorite human. "Grazie, Maria." Oscar lifted his spoon, tasted, and his eyes rolled back in what could only be described as ecstasy. "This is... Maria, this is the best soup I've ever had in my entire life. I could die happy right now, truly. Just bury me with this soup." Maria's cheeks flushed pink, but she waved off the compliment with a practiced flick of her wrist before ladling soup into Angela's bowl. Angela took a careful spoonful. The liquid hit her tongue, and her instincts, honed by 3 years working in Charleston kitchens, kicked in before she could stop them. "It needs salt," she set down her spoon, "and the meat isn't cooked through properly." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Maria's hand flew to her hip, her dark eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "Excuse me. This is my grandmother's recipe. I've been making it for years and everyone has loved it." Angela lifted her chin, refusing to back down despite the dangerous glint in Maria's eyes. "Well, I'm a cook, and I'm telling you it needs work." Raphael set down his wineglass with a soft clink that somehow managed to silence both women. He turned that cold gaze on Angela, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force pressing against her chest. "You're making friends quickly, I see." His voice was silk, wrapped around steel. "If you're going to act like a spoiled child, you can leave the table." Angela's chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet. "Fine. I didn't want to be here anyway." His hand closed around her wrist before she could take a single step. Not painful, but firm, unyielding, The heat of his skin against hers sent electricity skating up her arm, and she hated herself for noticing. "Sit." The word was quiet, absolute. "You haven't eaten in hours." Angela's empty stomach betrayed her with another growl. She stood there, caught between pride and hunger, his fingers still wrapped around her wrist. Her pulse hammered beneath his touch, and she wondered if he could feel it, if he knew exactly how much he was affecting her. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself back into the chair. Raphael released her, reaching for his wine as if nothing had happened. "Maria is a wonderful cook. I learned to respect a woman's work when I was young." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of vulnerability that disappeared as quickly as it came. "My mother taught me that." He took a slow sip, then continued. "But you're a cook yourself, aren't you, Angela? Perhaps you could help Maria. Improve her recipes." Maria made a sound of pure outrage, slamming the ladle back into the tureen. "Improve? My recipes don't need—" "That will be all, Maria." The dismissal was gentle but final. Maria shot Angela a look that promised future retribution, the kind of look that said, "I will put something terrible in your food," then stormed back into the kitchen, her curls bouncing with every furious step. Oscar leaned toward Angela, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Maria really does cook well. She just—" He glanced toward the kitchen with that lovesick expression. "She needs encouragement, you know." Angela ignored him, turning to face Raphael directly. Her eyes blazed with defiance. "How long do you think you can keep me here?" Raphael lifted his wineglass, swirling the dark liquid with lazy elegance. The candlelight caught the sharp angles of his face, making shadows dance across his features. "You just arrived, little dove." His eyes met hers over the rim. "How long you stay depends on the information you give me. Your father stole from me. You're going to help me get it back." "I don't know anything about my father's money." "And if you don't have any information—" That cold smile returned, all teeth and no warmth. "Then you'll work as my cook until you remember something useful." Oscar's head snapped up from his soup, his expression shifting from dreamy to panicked in an instant. "Wait, what about Maria?" Raphael didn't miss a beat. "She'll be the sous chef, Oscar." "Boss, you can't demote Maria. She'll kill me. She'll put poison in my food, and my mother will cry at my funeral, and—" Angela didn't wait to hear the rest. She pushed back from the table and strode toward the stairs, her dress trailing behind her. She could feel Raphael's gaze burning into her back with every step, but she refused to look back. "I have to get out of here. I have to find a way to escape." The bedroom door was unlocked. Angela slammed it behind her and stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. Her reflection caught her eye in the mirror. She looked like a nightmare, mascara smeared down her cheeks, her once beautiful chestnut waves now a tangled mess. And this dress, this stupid, cursed wedding dress. A pile of clothes sat folded on the bed. Someone had put them there while she was at dinner. Angela reached behind her back, fumbling for the zipper. Her fingers found the tab, but when she pulled, it didn't budge. She tugged harder, twisting awkwardly. Nothing. "Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth. "Come on, you stupid—" The zipper was stuck, completely stuck. Angela let out a sound of pure frustration, her hands shaking with exhaustion and rage. She was trapped in this dress, trapped in this house. The air shifted behind her. Cedar, and something darker. She spun around, heart racing. Raphael stood inches away, having entered so silently she hadn't heard the door open. His gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Before she could speak, his hands gripped her waist and pulled her back against his chest. "Hold still." His breath was warm against her ear, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. Angela's body went rigid, every nerve ending screaming alarm. She felt his fingers find the zipper, felt him work it free with a single smooth motion. The wedding dress loosened around her body, the fabric sliding down her shoulders, pooling at her feet in a heap of white lace. Cool air hit her bare back. Angela's arms flew up to cover her chest, clutching herself as if she could somehow become smaller, invisible. Raphael didn't step back. I pulled this zipper up. His voice was silk and sin. Now I'm pulling it down. She could feel his smile against her hair. Quite meaningful, don't you think? Before she could respond, his hands gripped her shoulders and spun her around to face him. Angela stumbled, her arms still crossed protectively over her chest, and found herself staring up into those pale, piercing eyes. His expression was hard, unreadable, but his gaze burned with something that made her skin flush hot. Raphael leaned closer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Be a good girl, Angela." The words sent shivers racing down her spine. "I've tried to be civil with you. Believe me, you don't want to meet the other side of me." His hand came up, and she flinched, expecting pain, but he didn't strike. Instead, his finger traced along her jaw, slow and deliberate, mapping the curve of her face. Angela's breath hitched, her pulse so loud she was certain he could hear it. "You're in my house now." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, feather-light, devastating. "You owe me your father's debt. You know what you need to do to be free." He pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Now sleep. I expect you on your best behavior tomorrow." Raphael walked toward the door, but before closing it, he paused, turned. Angela stood frozen in the middle of the room, arms still pressed against her chest, her skin flushed pink, her breathing uneven. The wedding dress lay crumpled at her feet. His gaze traveled over her slowly, deliberately. A ghost of a smile curved his lips. Then he closed the door. The lock clicked into place. Angela released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her knees threatened to buckle, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. His touch still burned on her skin, his scent still lingered in the air. What is happening to me? She should hate him. He had ruined her wedding day, dragged her from her own ceremony like property. But what wedding? Johnny had sold her, traded her like cattle to pay off his own mess. While she was saving herself for him, he was sleeping with other women. Raphael hadn't saved her, not intentionally, but he had ripped away the blindfold, showed her the truth she'd been too naive to see. Should I fear him? Hate him? She didn't have an answer. Angela pulled on the silk pajamas with trembling hands and crawled into the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She would escape. She had to. Before he touched her again, and before her traitorous body stopped fighting, sunlight crept through the curtains, pulling Angela from a dreamless sleep. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Yesterday felt like a fever dream, but the ache in her fists, from pounding on that door for hours, reminded her it was all too real. "Stop it!" She threw off the covers. Focus. She showered quickly and returned to find fresh clothes laid out on the bed. Simple jeans, a white cotton t-shirt. She dressed, grateful to finally be out of that cursed wedding dress. She studied her reflection in the mirror. Without the makeup, without the ruined curls, she looked like herself again. Just Angela Fiore, 23 years old, in way over her head. The right moment will come, she told herself, pulling her damp hair into a low ponytail. He can't watch me forever. But right now I need to be smart, gain their trust, buy time. She unlocked the door, apparently last night's imprisonment had been temporary, and made her way downstairs, following the scent of something warm and sweet drifting up from the kitchen. Maria stood at the stove, her dark curls pinned back, a spatula in one hand. Golden pancakes sizzled in a cast-iron pan, and her shoulders were set with the rigid posture of someone who hadn't forgotten yesterday's insult. Angela hesitated in the doorway. She had two choices: make an enemy or make an ally. Those smell incredible. Maria's spatula paused mid-flip. She didn't turn around. Angela moved closer. And they look perfect. Getting that color is harder than people think. The rigidity in Maria's shoulders eased slightly. She turned, dark eyes still guarded but no longer hostile. "Mr. Mancini likes pancakes for breakfast." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "I've had a lot of practice." Before she could respond, a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. "I love them too, Maria." Oscar filled the entrance, his massive arms crossed over his chest, staring at the pancakes with pure longing. "But I'm on a diet. Can't have any." Maria rolled her eyes. "You've been on this diet for a month and lost 2 kilograms. Don't think I don't know about the cannoli last Tuesday." "Maria." Oscar held up his hands in surrender, but his eyes were soft as he looked at her. "You make everything too delicious. It's not fair." Angela watched the exchange, her lips curving into an involuntary smile. This enormous man gazed at Maria like she was the only woman in the world. It was so pure, so unexpected, that something in Angela's chest loosened. "Maybe I'm not in as much danger as I thought." "Maria." Angela touched her arm lightly. "I'm sure your pancakes are already amazing, but can I show you a little trick?" Maria's eyebrows rose, curiosity overtaking defensiveness. Angela reached for the baking soda and vinegar. "Most people overmix the batter, but if you fold this in at the last second, barely stir—" She demonstrated quickly. "You'll have the fluffiest pancakes anyone's ever tasted." Maria watched with focused attention. "Show me." They worked together, Angela demonstrating while Maria absorbed every detail. When the first batch came off the griddle, they were impossibly light, golden pillows that seemed to float on the plate. "Now," Angela arranged fresh berries on top. "Presentation. People eat with their eyes first." Maria stepped back to admire the result. "These look like they belong in a magazine." The sound of footsteps silenced them both. Raphael appeared in the doorway, and Angela felt the air in the kitchen shift. He wore a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, charcoal trousers that fit like they'd been sewn onto his body. His dark hair was still damp, and his gaze found her immediately. "Back to normal, I see." He studied her slowly, the simple jeans, the white t-shirt, her damp hair pulled back. "So this is what Angela looks like when she's not a bride. Calm, composed." Angela didn't smile, didn't give him anything. She simply walked to the dining table and sat down, keeping her expression neutral. Everyone took their places, Raphael at the head, Angela to his right, Oscar across from her. Maria brought out the pancakes with a flourish. Raphael took one bite. His eyebrows rose. "My God, Maria, what did you do this morning? These are extraordinary." Maria's cheeks flushed with pleasure, and she shot Angela a quick wink that Raphael didn't catch. Angela pressed her lips together, fighting the smile that threatened to break free. Oscar waved his fork excitedly. "Boss, Angela taught her the secret, the bubbles and the—" He made a vague hand gesture. "The fluffy thing." Maria's hand connected with the back of his head with a light tap. "You're impossible." But there was a smile hiding at the corner of her mouth. "One pancake. Then you leave my kitchen." Oscar grinned. "Worth it." But Raphael wasn't looking at either of them. His pale gaze had slid to Angela, and something passed through his expression. Approval, maybe. Interest. His lips curved slightly. "Useful already." He returned his attention to his plate, but Angela could feel his awareness of her like a physical weight. "I'm impressed." The meal continued in relative silence. Angela ate mechanically, her mind churning. He'd praised her. That was something. Trust was built in small moments. Raphael pushed back from the table. As he stood, he turned to Oscar. "This afternoon, take Angela to the restaurant kitchen. It's Monday. She can help with our usual preparations." Angela's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Raphael met her glare without flinching, one eyebrow raised. "You heard me. You're not going to sit around like a princess while everyone else contributes. I'm your prisoner, not your employee." "You're neither." He straightened his cuffs with infuriating calm. "You're my guest who owes me $10 million, and guests in my house earn their keep." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Oscar will bring you at noon. Wear comfortable shoes." Then he was gone. Oscar leaned toward Angela, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's a compliment, you know. From him, it's basically a love poem." Angela stared at him. "That's deeply concerning." She sat there, Fury and something else, something dangerously close to hope, warring in her chest. The restaurant, outside. He's letting me outside. If she could get out of this house, maybe she could find a way to run. Oscar was watching her with knowing eyes. "Don't even think about it," he said quietly. "The boss trusts me to watch you. I take that seriously." Angela met his gaze with defiance she didn't entirely feel. "We'll see." Oscar just smiled, surprisingly gentle on that brutal face. "Yes, we will." Two massive cast-iron pots sat on the industrial stove, steam rising from their surfaces. Angela stood before them, wooden spoon in hand, staring at enough ingredients to feed a small army. These pots could feed half of Italy. She turned to Oscar, who had planted himself on a stool by the door. "What is this, a military operation?" Oscar shrugged his massive shoulders. "Special dishes. You cook. I watch." "But doesn't this restaurant have actual chefs?" Angela gestured at the gleaming professional kitchen around her, the kind of setup she'd dreamed about back when she was working the line at the cafe in Charleston. "People who get paid for this? They make the regular menu." Oscar crossed his arms, settling deeper into his observation post. "You make these." Angela wanted to argue, but the ingredients laid out before her told their own story. Fresh ground beef, San Marzano tomatoes, aromatics already prepped and waiting. 2 recipes she could make in her sleep. Fresh pasta with meat sauce and beef in tomato sauce. Classic Italian comfort food, scaled up to institutional proportions. She got to work. 3 hours of chopping, stirring, and simmering. By the time both pots were ready, Angela's arms ached and sweat had soaked through her shirt. The kitchen smelled incredible, rich tomato and slow-cooked meat, but her stomach was too tired to care. She wiped sweat from her forehead and caught Oscar doing the same, though he hadn't moved from his stool. "You've been standing there for 3 hours." "Sitting," Oscar corrected. "And I was told not to leave you." Angela set down her spoon, studying him with new eyes. The scarred face, the massive frame, the way he positioned himself between her and every exit without seeming to think about it. "You're not just a driver, are you?" Oscar's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Pride, maybe. "Second cousin." He straightened slightly on his stool. "Right hand, left hand on bad days." "You talk about him like you've known him forever." Oscar paused, and Angela saw it, the moment his guard slipped, just a fraction. "I've known him since he was—" He caught himself. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something harder, colder. "Since he was already dangerous." Angela turned back to the stove, lowering the flame under the pasta sauce, but her mind was racing. "Since he was what, Oscar?" "Careful." The single word landed heavy in the air. She glanced over his shoulder. The jovial giant who complained about diets and mooned over Maria had vanished. In his place sat something far more dangerous. Angela tried a different approach, keeping her voice light. "You know, for a Mafia boss, he eats like someone who—" Oscar stood. The movement was fluid, almost casual, but suddenly his shadow fell across her. He took one step closer, and Angela found herself backing against the counter. "Say one wrong thing about him." Oscar's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. "And I won't be smiling anymore." Angela's pulse spiked. She'd seen Oscar joke, complain, pine after Maria like a lovesick teenager. She'd almost forgotten what he was, who he served. "I joke. I eat. I complain about diets." His eyes remained serious. "But when it comes to him, I don't joke." Angela nodded slowly, not trusting her voice. Oscar studied her for a long moment, then returned to his stool as if nothing had happened. "The sauces smell good. You're talented." When the cooking was finally done, Angela collapsed onto a metal chair in the corner, every muscle screaming. She hadn't worked this hard since her double shifts at the cafe, and at least there she'd gotten paid. "First, he kidnaps me from my own wedding," she muttered, pressing her palms against her aching lower back. "Now he's got me working like a kitchen slave. If he thinks this is going to be my life? The back door swung open. A stream of servers in black uniforms flooded into the kitchen, moving with practiced efficiency. They lifted the massive pots like they weighed nothing, carrying them toward the exit. Oscar stood, stretching. "Time to go, Miss Angela. We can head home now." Home. The word caught in her throat. But then she saw it. Oscar turning to say something to one of the servers, his attention diverted for just a moment. The back door, still open. Afternoon light spilling through. Angela moved. She was through the door before conscious thought caught up with her feet, legs pumping, lungs burning, freedom so close she could taste it. And then she stopped. The scene before her froze her in place more effectively than any locked door ever could. Tents had been set up in the alley behind the restaurant, simple canvas structures providing shade from the afternoon sun. Folding tables lined the space, and behind them the servers were already ladling food from her pots into waiting bowls. The line stretched around the corner. Elderly women in worn house dresses, men with weathered faces and calloused hands, children clinging to their mothers' skirts, eyes fixed on the steaming food with naked hunger. Did I cook for them? Angela stood rooted to the spot, watching an old woman accept a bowl of her pasta with trembling hands. The woman's eyes closed as she took the first bite, and something like peace washed over her lined face. I cooked for people who needed it. Heavy footsteps behind her. Oscar arrived, breathing hard, his face a mask of barely controlled alarm. "Miss Angela." His hand closed around her elbow. "There will be consequences for this." But Angela couldn't move, couldn't look away. "Oscar." Her voice came out strange, thick. "Raphael feeds homeless people." Oscar's grip on her arm tightened, but not cruelly. He was already steering her toward the waiting car. "We're leaving, Miss Angela." His voice was firm. "The boss will be home soon. He won't be happy if you're not there." Angela let herself be guided into the black SUV, her legs moving on autopilot. Through the tinted window, she watched the last of the line shuffle forward, watched a young mother break off a piece of bread for her toddler. The car pulled away, and Angela pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Is he a good man wearing a monster's mask, or a monster who sometimes forgets to be cruel? The city blurred past outside, and she had no answers, only more questions, and a growing fear that the answer might change everything. Angela stepped through the front door, her legs still shaky from what she'd witnessed. Another time, she told herself, the right moment will come. But the image of those hungry faces haunted her. The elderly woman with trembling hands, the children watching the food like it was salvation itself. She'd been ready to run, and instead she'd frozen in place like her feet had grown roots. She needed to call someone. Miranda, her roommate, or the cafe. Someone had to be wondering where she'd disappeared to. But her phone was gone, confiscated along with everything else from her old life. Maria was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Angela approached carefully. "Maria, could I maybe borrow your phone? Just for 10 seconds. I need to—" Maria's knife paused mid-chop. She looked up, one dark eyebrow arching toward her hairline. "Miss Angela." Her voice was kind but firm. "We all know you're a captive guest here. You're asking me to risk my job, and possibly my neck, for a phone call that will absolutely be reported to the boss." She returned to her vegetables. "The answer is no." Angela opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Pushing wouldn't help. Not yet. She wandered into the garden instead, letting the late afternoon sun warm her face. The grounds were beautiful. Manicured hedges, a stone fountain. A cage was still a cage, but at least this one had a nice view. The sound of car doors made her turn. Raphael strode through the main entrance, 4 men in dark suits flanking him like shadows. His voice carried across the foyer, sharp, commanding, the tone of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. He was giving orders, his jaw set in that hard line she was beginning to recognize. His gaze swept the garden and found her watching. For a moment their eyes met. Then he looked away, dismissing her without a word, and disappeared into the house. "Arrogant bastard," she murmured to herself. Angela's hand flew to her hair, smoothing down the wind-blown strands as she hurried after him. She caught herself mid-motion and froze. Why do I care what I look like? She shook off the thought and followed at a distance, curiosity overriding caution. She tracked his footsteps to a closed door at the end of the hallway, his study, she assumed. Voices filtered through the wood, too muffled to make out. She leaned closer, pressing her ear against the door. It swung open so suddenly she nearly fell forward. Raphael stood in the doorway, the four men filing past him with murmured goodbyes. His gaze locked onto hers, and before she could step back, his hand closed around her wrist. He pulled her into the study, kicking the door shut behind them. Listening at doors now? His grip was firm but not painful. That's a dangerous habit, little dove. I wasn't listening. Angela lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. I was just passing by. Passing by? He released her wrist, but didn't step back. If anything, he moved closer, eating up the space between them until she could smell his cologne. And today? At the restaurant? Were you just passing by when you tried to run? Angela forced herself to hold his gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to look away. Those pale eyes seemed to see straight through her. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out harder than she intended. That I was cooking for hungry people. You could have said something. I would have thought... She swallowed. I would have thought less that you're a monster. Something crossed his face, gone before she could name it. Charity isn't a performance. His voice was flat, final. You did your job. The rest doesn't concern you. He tilted his head, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then he leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. Or are you getting too interested in me, little dove? Angela's breathing stopped. She could feel the warmth of him radiating through the thin fabric of her shirt, could smell something earthier underneath his cologne. Her stomach tightened, heat pooling low in her belly, and her lips parted without her permission. No. She pressed her palm against his chest and pushed, stepping back until she hit the edge of his desk. The next morning, Angela found herself halfway up the garden wall when Oscar's shadow fell over her. Miss Angela? She froze, one hand gripping the ivy, her foot wedged into a gap between stones. Slowly, she looked down. Oscar stood with his arms crossed, that scarred face caught somewhere between disappointment and amusement. The wall is 12 feet high. He tilted his head, studying her pathetic progress. You've made it about 4. Angela dropped to the ground, brushing dirt from her jeans. I was just exercising. Uh-huh. Oscar's expression didn't change. The boss said you might try something. He also said if you did, you'd be cooking for me and Maria until he gets back. Her jaw tightened. That's not... Tiramisu. Oscar held up one massive finger. And lasagna. Maria's been wanting both for weeks. The punishment, as it turned out, wasn't entirely terrible. Angela spent the afternoon layering pasta sheets and ricotta while Maria watched with barely concealed excitement. Oscar hovered nearby, supposedly on guard duty, but mostly just inhaling deeply every time Angela opened the oven. By evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, plates piled high. Maria had pulled out a bottle of wine, don't tell the boss, and something that felt almost like friendship settled over the room. So, Angela twirled pasta around her fork. Raphael owns clubs too, not just restaurants. Maria nodded, reaching for the bread basket. Nightclubs, restaurants, some hotels. His father built most of it, but Raphael expanded after he died. She paused. He was only 23 when he took over. No mother, no siblings. Just him and all of this. No mother. She died when he was young. Maria's voice softened. He doesn't talk about it. None of us ask. Angela filed the information away. Orphaned young, inherited an empire, alone. Is that why he's so cold? The next 3 days blurred together. Mornings in the kitchen with Maria, trading recipes and laughter. Oscar's hopeless flirting, something almost like routine. The 4th night, Raphael still hadn't returned. Angela filled the jacuzzi in her bathroom, watching steam rise from the water. The marble tub was ridiculous, but if she was going to be trapped here, she might as well enjoy the amenities. She sank into the hot water, letting the bubbles swallow her up to her shoulders, her muscles unknotted one by one, tension draining away. This isn't so bad, she thought, closing her eyes. If I have to be a prisoner, at least it's a comfortable prison. But the moment her eyes closed, he was there. Pale eyes, sharp jaw, that infuriating hint of a smile that made her want to slap him and kiss him in equal measure. Raphael. Angela's eyes snapped open, and she pressed wet hands to her flushed cheeks. What is wrong with me? A week ago, she'd been about to marry Johnny. A week ago, she'd thought she knew what her future looked like. A small apartment, maybe kids someday, a man who loved her. All of it had been a lie. Comfortable? Angela's heart nearly stopped. Raphael stood in the bathroom doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. Control radiated from him without effort. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, his tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd been traveling. His gaze swept over her, what he could see beneath the bubbles, with lazy appreciation. What are you doing here? Angela sank lower into the water, arms crossing over her chest beneath the foam. Get out! I just arrived home. He didn't move. In his hand, she noticed a garment bag. He watched her like someone used to deciding outcomes. Did you miss me, little dove? Angela's jaw tightened. I was hoping you'd never come back. His lips curved slightly, the same expression that made her stomach flip in ways she refused to acknowledge. Get dressed. He walked past her to the bedroom, laying the garment bag on the bed along with a shoebox. We're going out. He checked his watch. You have 30 minutes. Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him. Angela sat in the cooling water, her pulse racing. She should be angry. She was angry. The audacity of walking in on her like that, of ordering her around like she was his property. But why does your face feel so warm? Why did your body hum with awareness the moment you saw him? She pushed the thoughts away and climbed out of the tub. The dress was champagne-colored silk, short enough to show off her legs, with a subtle shimmer that caught the light when she moved. Matching heels waited beside it, strappy sandals that added 3 inches to her height. Angela stared at herself in the mirror. She looked expensive, like someone who belonged in a world of private jets and luxury cars. A knock at the door. She opened it to find Raphael waiting, his expression unreadable. But something shifted in his gaze as it traveled down her body. Desire, brief and dangerous, quickly contained. You look good. The words came out low, almost reluctant, as if he hadn't meant to say them. Angela smoothed her hands over the silk. Where are we going? That requires all this. One of my clubs. Important meeting. He turned toward the stairs, not waiting for her. Try to keep up. Angela followed, her heels clicking against the marble. She wasn't his date. She was his prisoner in a pretty dress. The nightclub pulsed with music and bodies, neon lights cutting through artificial fog. Raphael moved through the crowd like he owned the place, which he did. People parted for him instinctively, some nodding in respect, others carefully avoiding eye contact. Stay close. His hand found her lower back, guiding her through the chaos. Don't wander off. Angela followed, cataloguing exits out of habit even as she realized she wasn't actually looking for escape routes. When had that stopped? A woman materialized from the crowd, tall, stunning, in a red dress that fit like a second skin. She pressed herself against Raphael, kissing the corner of his mouth with practiced familiarity. It's been weeks. Her voice was a purr. Where have you been hiding? Angela's stomach clenched. She swallowed hard, forcing her expression neutral. The woman's gaze slid to Angela, dismissive. Who's this? Your niece or something? Raphael's arm curved around Angela's waist, pulling her against his side. The warmth of his body seeped through the thin silk of her dress. She's with me, Valeria. Something cold flickered across Valeria's perfect features. Her lips pressed into a thin line before she forced a smile. How nice for you. She turned and disappeared into the crowd without another word. Angela tried to step away from Raphael's grip, but his arm tightened. Jealous? His breath was warm against her ear. In your dreams. His low laugh vibrated through her. She knew it was wrong. Her body didn't care. The private lounge upstairs was all leather and dark wood, insulated from the throbbing bass below. 3 men waited at a table, European, judging by their accents, with the sharp eyes of serious businessmen. Raphael shook hands, made introductions. Angela sat beside him, acutely aware of every time his thigh brushed against hers beneath the table. "Your clubs are impressive." The eldest of the 3, silver-haired, steel-eyed, leaned back in his chair. "But if we're investing, we'd want to see expansion. Perhaps a restaurant club hybrid, broader appeal, higher margins." Raphael's expression didn't change, but Angela felt him stiffen beside her. "This is my brand." His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I don't change concepts on demand. I already have restaurants. If you want a different product, find a different partner." The investor's eyebrow rose. He turned to Angela. "The young lady hasn't spoken all evening. Perhaps she has an opinion?" Angela's throat tightened. Butterflies rioted in her stomach. She glanced at Raphael. "She's not familiar with the club business." His tone was dismissive, final. The investor smiled thinly. "Humor me. Fresh perspectives can be valuable." Angela swallowed. Her palms grew slick with sweat, but something in the investor's expectant gaze pushed her forward. "I don't know much about clubs." She heard her own voice, steadier than she felt. "But I know people." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Raphael watched her like a choice. "People consume fast these days. They don't want to eat dinner and then wait for the same place to turn into a club." She hesitated, afraid she was overstepping. "They want separate experiences. Good food in one place, nightlife somewhere else." The investor leaned forward slightly. Angela took it as permission to continue. "Your customers are probably 20s to 40? That age group is impatient. They don't want everything bundled." Her voice wavered slightly. I mean, if this is a club, maybe it should just be a club, but with a clear identity. Are you for people who want to disappear into a crowd, or for regulars who want familiar faces after dinner?" She stopped, suddenly aware of how much she'd said. Heat crept up her neck. "Try to be both," she finished quietly, "and you end up being neither. But if you narrow it down, people stay loyal, and loyalty means the brand lasts." Silence filled the lounge. Monday morning found Angela in the restaurant kitchen again, but this time with a different task. The pastry chef had called in sick, and the dining room needed desserts for tonight's service. "Show me what you can do," the head chef had said, gesturing at the ingredients. "Something special." Angela's fingers twitched with anticipation. Finally, a real challenge. She worked in focused silence, building layers in individual glass cups. The bottom layer was bitter chocolate mixed with a hint of espresso, dark, intense, with just enough edge to make the tongue pause. The middle was rose-infused cream, delicate but not cloying, sweet enough to soothe but not enough to overwhelm. And on top, a paper-thin caramelized shell, golden and fragile, the kind that would shatter at the slightest pressure. Oscar watched from his usual post by the door, massive arms crossed. When Angela finished the last cup, he leaned forward, squinting at the layers like they contained state secrets. "Beautiful. Dangerous. Complicated." He nodded slowly. "Reminds me of Maria." Angela bit back a smile. "It's called The Woman in Love." Oscar's eyebrows shot up, that scarred face lighting up like a kid who'd solved a puzzle. "So I was right. It is about Maria. It's not about—" Angela shook her head. "Never mind. Why do you think it has that name?" She set down her spatula, studying her creation. "Because it looks strong on the surface, but the most fragile part is hidden inside." Oscar was quiet for a moment, then he shrugged and reached for one of the finished cups. "Don't even think about it." Angela swatted his hand away. "These are for paying customers." In the back office, Raphael was reviewing contracts when Oscar slipped through the door. "Boss!" The big man's voice held an unusual note of excitement. "That new dessert Angela made. Customers are going crazy. asking for seconds, thirds. One guy tried to buy the whole batch. Raphael didn't look up from his papers. And? It's called The Woman in Love. Oscar paused, clearly waiting for a reaction. She said it's because it looks strong on the outside, but the most fragile part is hidden inside. Raphael's pen stopped moving. For a long moment, he stared at the contract without seeing it. Then slowly, the corner of his mouth curved upward. Not his usual smirk, something softer, almost thoughtful. Interesting name. Oscar waited for more. Nothing came. Raphael returned to his paperwork as if the conversation had never happened. But as Oscar left, he could have sworn the boss was still smiling. Angela knew nothing of this exchange. The back office door was half open when Angela passed it an hour later. She'd been looking for Oscar. He'd vanished again, probably raiding the walk-in freezer, and had wandered too far into the administrative wing. She didn't mean to stop, didn't mean to look, but the voices made her freeze. Raphael sat behind a heavy desk, two men standing before him, rigid, waiting. The air in the room felt thick, dangerous, charged with something Angela couldn't name. You used my name. Raphael's voice was quiet, almost soft. He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. Made promises I didn't authorize. The man on the left, younger, sweating, shook his head frantically. Mr. Mancini, I swear, I was just trying to... Raphael lifted one hand. The man fell silent instantly. You were trying to profit from my reputation without my permission. No raised voice. No threats, just fact, stated with the kind of certainty that made the air feel thin. Raphael lifted one finger, a small gesture, almost lazy. Two more men appeared from somewhere behind Angela. She hadn't even heard them approach. They flanked the sweating man, gripping his arms. Wait. The man's voice cracked. Please, I can explain. Raphael didn't blink. Take him. 3 words. That was all. The men dragged him out through a side door. No violence, no screaming. Just gone, like he'd never existed. Ice water flooded Angela's veins. Her stomach dropped, and she pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Her fingertips went numb, tingling with adrenaline she couldn't burn. Her legs had turned to stone, refusing to carry her away, even as every instinct screamed, run. The remaining man bowed his head and slipped out. The office emptied. And then Raphael looked up. Their eyes met through the half-open door. Angela's breathing stopped. She should move, should pretend she'd seen nothing, should... Raphael rose from his chair, crossing the room in 3 slow strides. He pulled the door fully open, his gaze never leaving her face. You shouldn't have been here. The words were flat, emotionless. Angela couldn't tell if it was a statement or a threat. She swallowed hard, her throat dry as sand. But I was. Something crossed his features. Surprise, maybe, or respect. She couldn't read him, had never been able to read him, but she held his gaze anyway, refusing to look away, even as her hands trembled at her sides, silence stretched between them. Raphael stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Were you scared? Angela's heart raced. She could lie, should lie. But somehow, with those pale eyes cutting through her, the truth was the only thing that would come out. Yes. He studied her, that unreadable expression fixed in place. But you're still here. Angela held his gaze. Her hands trembled. Her spine didn't. Yes. The word hung in the air, heavy, significant, a line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Raphael lifted his hand. His fingers brushed her cheek, tracing the curve of her jaw with unbearable gentleness. Angela's breath stuttered, warmth spreading through her despite the cold knot of fear still lodged in her chest. Then he pulled back. No kiss, no threat, no explanation, just that single touch, and then empty space where his hand had been. Go back to the kitchen, Angela. She went, cheeks burning, legs unsteady, skin still tingling where his fingers had traced her jaw. That night, alone in her room, Angela stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what she'd witnessed. If he could be that cold over someone using his name, Her thoughts circled endlessly. What would he do to me for my father's $10 million? The answer should have been obvious, should have terrified her into planning another escape, another desperate climb over garden walls. But he hasn't. The realization settled over her like a weight. He'd had every opportunity, every right by his own brutal logic, and yet here she was, fed, clothed, protected, making desserts in his kitchen instead of bleeding in some basement. Maybe he's waiting, she told herself. Maybe it's coming. But another voice, quieter and more dangerous, whispered something else entirely. Or maybe he doesn't want to hurt you at all. Angela closed her eyes, and his face burned behind her lids. She didn't know which possibility frightened her more, and she had no idea that tomorrow everything was about to change. Raphael didn't come home that night. Angela told herself she didn't care, told herself it was none of her business where he went or who he was with. But she caught herself glancing at the front door 3 times before midnight, and by the time she finally went to bed, irritation had coiled tight in her chest. Why do you even care? She had no answer, and that made her angrier. The dream came without warning. Raphael's fingers traced her cheekbone exactly as they had in his office. But this time he didn't pull away. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her face toward his. His gaze burned into hers until she couldn't breathe. Little dove. His mouth descended, slow, deliberate. The kiss started gentle, testing, questioning. But when she gasped against his lips, something in him snapped. He deepened the pressure, his other hand gripping her waist, pulling her flush against him until she could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. She moaned his name. Raphael. Angela's eyes flew open. Morning light flooded the room. Her heart raced, her skin damp, her lips tingling with the ghost of a kiss that had never happened. And Raphael Mancini stood at the foot of her bed. Good morning. Her blood went cold. She yanked the blanket up to her chin, heat flooding her face. You can't just... Her voice came out strangled. A woman's room. You don't just walk in like... That faint curve of his lips appeared, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. Oh, God. Her stomach clenched. Did I say something? In my sleep? Did I moan his name out loud? She couldn't tell from his expression. His face gave nothing away, as always. Get dressed. He turned toward the door. We leave in an hour. The jet is waiting. Angela blinked, still clutching the blanket. What? Where are we going? Raphael paused at the threshold, glanced back over his shoulder. Monaco. The door closed behind him. Angela sat frozen for a full 10 seconds before her brain caught up. Monaco? Never imagined she'd see anything beyond Charleston. Monaco. Her heart was still racing, but she wasn't sure if it was fear or excitement anymore. 1 hour later, Angela stood in the entrance hall with a small backpack slung over her shoulder. 2 leather suitcases waited by the door. Oscar leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Raphael give last-minute instructions to one of the guards. How many days are we gone? Angela asked, eyeing the luggage. 2 nights. Raphael checked his watch. The investors you met at the club were impressed, so you'll be accompanying me this time. He glanced at Oscar. Not him. Oscar pressed a hand to his heart, wounded. Boss, am I being put out to pasture here? Raphael's expression didn't change. You're staying to oversee the restaurant. Oscar's shoulders sagged dramatically. Sure. Restaurant, right. While you're drinking champagne in Monaco with a beautiful woman. No big deal. I'm fine. Angela bit back a smile. She nodded toward the suitcases. All this for 2 days? Raphael picked up the smaller of the 2, held it out to her. This one's yours. Clothes, accessories, and whatever beauty products women consider essential. Angela stared at it. The leather was buttery soft, probably worth more than her entire wardrobe. You packed for me? I planned ahead. He opened the front door, gesturing for her to walk through. I always do. The jet was exactly as she remembered, all cream leather and polished wood, but the memory it triggered was different now. 3 weeks ago, I was on this same plane, terrified and heartbroken. She'd been dragged from her wedding, sold by the man she thought loved her, flying toward a stranger who might kill her. Now, I'm going to Monaco, and I'm excited. The realization unsettled her. How had everything shifted so fast? Raphael settled into the seat across from hers after takeoff, a glass of whiskey in hand. His white linen shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his forearms, dark trousers, no tie. He looks like a magazine cover, Angela thought, then immediately wished she hadn't. She glanced down at her own outfit, ponytail, Converse, jeans. Next to him, she probably looked like a teenager visiting her rich uncle. Linda appeared with that same flirtatious smile, leaning closer to Raphael than strictly necessary. "Anything else, Mr. Mancini?" Angela rolled her eyes. Some things never change. She stared out the window. "An iced margarita for my guest." Raphael's voice was casual. "Easy on the tequila." Angela's head snapped back. "How do you know I drink margaritas?" His lips twitched, the same expression that made her stomach flip. "I spent 2 years searching for you, Angela." He swirled his whiskey. "I know every detail of your life, including what you order on nights out." Warmth flooded her face. She turned back to the window, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. "Has any man ever known me this well?" The answer came quick and bitter. No. Johnny hadn't bothered. Her father hadn't stayed. When she finally looked back, Raphael was watching her with those pale eyes, steady and unreadable. "Tell me about your father." Angela's fingers tightened around the armrest. "I told you already. He left when I was 12. She kept her voice flat. "I don't know where he worked, where he lived, what he did with his life, just vague memories. A park. Ice cream once, maybe?" Raphael took a slow sip of whiskey. "You haven't been lucky with men." It wasn't a question. "No real man has ever given you the value you deserve." Angela's throat tightened. "Is that you?" The thought came unbidden. "Because you kidnapped me from my wedding, and somehow I've been safer these past 3 weeks than I've ever been." She didn't say it out loud. Raphael leaned forward slightly. "If you knew where the money was, what would you do with it?" Angela laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I wouldn't have been living in a roach-infested apartment, that's for sure." "Pretend you had it." His eyes held hers. "Dreaming is free. Tell me." She swallowed. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked what she wanted. "A place to live, I guess. Something small but mine. Maybe a car." She paused, looking at her hands. "Then, I'd open my own cafe. Pastries, desserts, experimental recipes. A little boutique spot where I could spend all day in the kitchen, trying new things, making people happy with what I create." When she looked up, the intensity in his gaze made her forget to breathe. She turned away quickly, her neck flushing pink. "Stupid stuff." "Never mind." Raphael leaned back in his seat. "I like when your cheeks flush, little dove." His voice dropped lower. "That innocence of yours. I find it quite attractive." Angela grabbed her margarita and drained it in 3 gulps. "I think I'll sleep." She moved to a seat farther away, pulse racing, desperately trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. Why does he make me fall apart like this? Monaco was another world entirely. Angela pressed her face to the car window, drinking in the Mediterranean blue, the white yachts bobbing in the harbour, the elegant buildings climbing the hillside like something from a postcard. This can't be real. The hotel lobby was all marble and crystal chandeliers. While Raphael spoke with the concierge, Angela hung back, watching. 2 women in designer dresses walked past, leggy, polished, dripping with diamonds. Their eyes lingered on Raphael, appreciation written plainly on their faces. Angela looked down at her jeans and Converse. "What am I doing here?" "Mr. Mancini." The bellboy led them to the elevator. "Our 2 finest suites, full sea and city views. The rooms connect through an interior door." 2 rooms, separate but connected. Angela bit her lip to hide her smile. She reached for her suitcase, but Raphael's hand closed around her arm first. He pulled her close, his mouth brushing her ear. "I hope you're not thinking of anything foolish." His breath was warm against her skin. "This city is beautiful, but dangerous. I'm the only one who can keep you safe here. Don't forget that." Angela's lips parted. Words died in her throat. All she could process was the heat of his grip, the scent of his cologne mixed with something deeper, warmer, his skin. Her arm burned where his fingers pressed. Static electricity seemed to dance between them. Then he released her. She walked into her room on unsteady legs, crossed to the balcony, and gripped the railing with trembling hands. The Mediterranean stretched before her, glittering under the afternoon sun. Yachts dotted the harbour. The city climbed the hills in shades of terracotta and cream. But Angela saw none of it. "You're in trouble," she told herself. "Serious trouble." She closed her eyes. You can't fall in love with him. But even as the thought formed, she knew it might already be too late. Angela stood in front of the open suitcase, running her fingers across fabrics softer than anything she'd ever owned. Did he choose these himself? Warmth crept into her face. She pulled out a black dress, short, with a neckline that plunged lower than she'd ever dared. But the cut was elegant, sophisticated rather than cheap. She put it on anyway. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, someone confident, someone who belonged in a world of private jets and Monaco nights. "Who are you becoming, Angela?" At 7:30, Angela opened her door just as Raphael raised his hand to knock. Neither of them moved. His gaze traveled down her body with deliberate slowness, the dress, the heels, the way the fabric clung to curves she usually kept hidden. He looked at her like a man holding himself back by a thread. "Beautiful little dove." The words came out low, almost reluctant, as if they'd escaped without permission. Angela crossed her arms. "I don't like when you call me that. It makes me feel weak." She stepped past him toward the elevator, heels clicking against marble. Raphael fell into step beside her, close enough that his scent wrapped around her, and her thoughts scattered. The elevator doors slid closed, sealing them in polished metal and silence. "Not because you're weak." He adjusted his cufflink without looking at her. "That day at the hotel room, you stood in that white dress like you had no idea what was about to happen. Pure, untouched, the most beautiful bride I'd ever seen." Angela's fingers curled into fists. She watched the floor numbers climb. "You reminded me of a dove," he continued, his reflection catching hers in the polished doors. "And you're still young. Inexperienced. That's not weakness. That's innocence. Something rare in my world." The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto the marble lobby. Angela stepped out first, stopped, turned, looked him dead in the eye. "Maybe I'm not as innocent as you think." She walked toward the exit without waiting for his response, her pulse kicking hard even as she kept her spine straight. Behind her, his footsteps paused, just one beat, before resuming slower, more deliberate. She didn't need to look back to know he was smiling. The restaurant was everything Monaco promised: elegant, expensive, exclusive. Half the room turned when Raphael entered. Angela stayed at his side, feeling simultaneously out of place and strangely protected. Dinner felt different. Not captor and captive, not Mafia boss and hostage, something else entirely. They talked about food. Angela analyzed each dish, guessing at techniques and ingredients. Raphael listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing when she got defensive about her opinions. The wine went down too easily, but it wasn't the alcohol making her dizzy. It was him, the way he leaned forward when she spoke, the way his fingers brushed hers when he passed the bread, the careful distance he maintained, close enough to feel intimate, far enough to leave her wanting more. This feels like a date. The realization should have terrified her. It didn't. The club was dark and loud. Strobing lights painted everything in shades of blue and purple, and the bass vibrated through Angela's chest like a second heartbeat. Raphael guided her through the crowd with a hand on her lower back. "I need to take this meeting alone." He nodded toward a private area. "Stay where I can see you." Angela raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a child." His eyes dropped briefly to her neckline before returning to her face. "No." His voice dropped. "You're not." Then he was gone. Angela ordered a margarita, then a second. She watched him from across the room, cataloguing details she had no business noticing. Why can't I stop looking at him? I should hate him. I should be plotting escape. But another voice whispered back, "Johnny took money to hand you over. You could be married right now to a cheater who spent your money and sold you out the first chance he got. Your first time would have been with someone who saw you as a transaction. Raphael taking you from that altar. Maybe it wasn't a kidnapping. Maybe it was something else. Come dance with me." Angela turned. A man had slid onto the stool beside her. Expensive watch, smile that didn't reach his eyes. His hand landed on her waist before she could react. Her body went rigid. "I said no." She shoved against his chest. "My boyfriend is here, and if you don't want trouble, walk away." The man laughed, grip tightening. "You're alone. If you had a boyfriend, he'd be—" "Get your hands off her." The voice came from behind them, low, quiet, lethal. The man's face went white. His hand dropped like her skin had burned him, and he stumbled backward, nearly falling in his haste to escape. Raphael stepped into view. His expression was calm, too calm, the kind of calm she'd seen before he'd ordered a man dragged away. "You have 3 seconds to leave this club." His voice didn't rise above a murmur. "Because in about 10, I'm going to break every finger you touched her with." The man was gone before Raphael finished speaking. Raphael turned to Angela. His eyes swept over her, checking for damage, and something in her chest loosened at the concern beneath the cold fury. He reached past her and set her glass aside with deliberate finality. "My boyfriend is here." The corner of his mouth curved. Interesting choice of words. Color rose in her cheeks. She looked down. "I just said that to make him leave." "Did you?" The question hung between them. Angela couldn't answer, couldn't look away from that gaze that seemed to see straight through her. Raphael extended his hand. "I shouldn't have left you alone looking like this." His eyes swept over her one more time. "Men will keep trying their luck." Angela hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, firm, certain. He led her through the crowd, past the bar, past the dance floor, out into the Monaco night where the Mediterranean breeze cooled her burning skin. Neither of them spoke, but he didn't let go of her hand, and Angela didn't pull away. The breeze had turned cool by the time they reached Port Hercule, Monaco's lights reflected in the dark water like scattered diamonds. Angela shivered. Before she could cross her arms, Raphael shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was still warm from his body, saturated with his scent. They walked in silence before the question she'd been swallowing finally clawed its way out. "How long are you going to keep me?" Raphael's stride didn't falter, but she saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. "I don't know anything about the money my father supposedly stole." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I've told you this. What exactly do you expect from me?" He stopped walking. For a long moment, he stood motionless, staring out at the water. Then he turned, and that cold gaze found hers with an intensity that made her lungs lock. "I don't keep anyone close without reason, Angela." His voice was quiet, measured. "In my world, betrayal doesn't just cost money, it threatens power. When your father stole from me, I didn't just lose $10 million. My reputation was damaged." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "And in my world, when a father sins, that sin binds his family." Angela looked away, blinking rapidly. Her throat tightened until she could barely force words through it. "I shouldn't have to pay for what he did." Her voice cracked. "I'm not a thief." Raphael reached out and caught her chin, tilting her face back toward his. The touch was gentle, but there was nothing soft about the look in his eyes. "If you know where my money is and you're staying silent," his thumb brushed along her jaw, "then silence is theft too. I haven't been harsh with you because your innocence stops me, but don't mistake patience for weakness." The wind caught her hair, blowing strands across her lips. Raphael lifted his free hand and tucked them back, his fingers lingering. "You're here because I like having you around." The admission seemed to cost him something. "But that's not enough to let you go." Angela's eyes burned, but her voice came out sharp. "I don't know anything. You can't keep me forever." That familiar half-smile curved his mouth, the one that made her want to slap him and kiss him in equal measure. "I can keep you wherever I want, for as long as I want." He resumed walking, hands sliding into his pockets. "By my side, in my restaurant, in my house. Maybe I'll arrange a marriage for you. One of my younger men, your choice, of course. I wouldn't want you to think I'm unreasonable." The corner of his mouth twitched, barely suppressing something close to laughter. Angela froze mid-step, her insides twisted. "What?" The word came out strangled. "You'd marry me off to someone?" Raphael glanced back, something almost playful in his expression. "You're young, beautiful. Eventually you'll have needs. I can't keep you locked away like a nun forever." His eyes dropped briefly to her body, then back to her face. "Though you've managed to save yourself this long." Angela's fists clenched. Color burned her face. "That's disgusting." Raphael turned fully, stepping closer with his hands still in his pockets. "No." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "That's reality." His gaze traveled from her eyes to her lips and stayed there one beat too long. "I don't force anyone, Angela. The ones who come to me come on their own." He stepped back, turning toward the hotel. "I won't force you into anyone's bed." He glanced over his shoulder. "You'll walk into one yourself. The only question is, whose?" The elevator ride was silent. Angela stood with her back pressed against the mirrored wall, her eyes stinging, her lips trembling. Raphael leaned against the opposite side, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. When the doors opened, Angela walked to her room on unsteady legs. She reached for the handle, then stopped. Something made her turn. Raphael was right behind her, closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Something you want to tell me, Angela?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her mind went blank. "I just—" He moved, one arm braced against the wall beside her head, caging her between his body and the door. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I'm listening." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Whatever you want to say. Now's the time." Angela's abs tightened. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. This man made breathing impossible with nothing but proximity, but she would never surrender, not to his threats, not to his body. "I hate you." The words escaped, a lie so obvious it hung between them like smoke. Raphael pulled back, his expression shifted. Loss? Hunger? She couldn't tell. Angela didn't wait to find out. She pushed through her door and slammed it shut, pressing her back against the wood, her ribs aching with each breath. The only thought in her head was how badly she wanted to be in his arms. Angela stood in the middle of her room, her mind a tangle of contradictions she couldn't unravel. The Mediterranean breeze called to her through the glass doors, promising cool air and clarity, and she crossed to the balcony without thinking. She stepped outside and froze. The adjacent balcony was separated from hers by only a few feet of wrought iron railing, and leaning against it, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Raphael. Shirtless, nothing but black boxes clinging to narrow hips, every line of muscle carved in moonlight and shadow. His chest was broad, defined, the kind of body that came from discipline rather than vanity. A thin scar traced across his ribs, old, faded, a story she didn't know. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The moment stretched between them like a wire pulled taut, vibrating with tension, neither acknowledged. Angela felt heat bloom in her belly, felt her pulse thrum in places she didn't want to think about. His gaze traveled over her slowly, the black dress still clinging to her curves, the bare shoulders, the flush she couldn't hide. and something dark flickered in those pale eyes. She retreated. The glass door slid shut behind her, and Angela pressed her back against it, her chest rising and falling too fast. Her skin felt too tight, too sensitive, like every nerve ending had been set on fire by nothing more than a look. "Think, Angela. Think." She began to pace, her bare feet silent on the cool marble. "You need to decide what you're going to do. How can you let him affect you like this? He's your captor, the man holding your future hostage." She sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing her palms against her eyes. Tell him the truth. Give him what he wants and walk away free. But even as the thought formed, she knew it wasn't that simple. Raphael Mancini didn't let things go. Not money, not grudges, not people who interested him. Would he even let you leave? Angela opened her eyes, drew a long breath, and released it slowly. Or, the thought crept in like smoke through a crack in the door. Take control. Make the choice yourself. Don't let him dictate the terms of your surrender, if you're going to surrender at all. She stood, crossed to the mirror, and studied her reflection. Wild hair from the evening's humidity, flushed cheeks, eyes that held something she barely recognized, determination maybe, or desire she'd stopped trying to deny. She smoothed her hair back with trembling fingers. Whatever happens next has to be my decision, my plan, my terms. Her gaze drifted to the connecting door between their rooms. She'd noticed it earlier but hadn't given it much thought. Now it seemed to pulse with possibility, with danger, with everything she was trying not to want. Angela walked toward it. Her fingers found the handle and she paused, biting her lower lip hard enough to hurt. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "Angela Fiore." She whispered the words to herself, barely audible. "No one decides your future. No one controls your life. You choose where it goes from here." A slow smile curved her lips, small, secret, defiant. "And you, Raphael Mancini. You'll only think you're in control, but from now on, the power is mine." She pressed down on the handle. The door clicked open. The room beyond was darker than hers, lit only by the moonlight streaming through open balcony doors. Angela stepped through, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet, her heart pounding so loud she was certain he must hear it. Raphael sat on the edge of the bed, still shirtless, still in those black boxers, his forearms resting on his knees. He was watching the door like he'd been waiting for her, like he'd known she would come. He rose slowly. Angela walked toward him, closing the distance between them with steps that felt both inevitable and terrifying. She stopped when they were close enough to touch, but not quite touching, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his bare skin. Angela. Her name was a whisper on his lips, rough with something she recognized now, the same hunger she felt coiling low in her belly. "I decide who I want." Her voice came out steadier than she expected, her chin lifting with a confidence she wasn't sure she felt. "I decide what I choose. No one else." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or respect. His hand came up to cup her face, his palm warm against her cheek. "And what do you choose?" Angela answered by closing the last inch between them. Raphael's mouth found hers with a desperation that stole her breath, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against him until there was no space left between them. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined, not gentle, not tentative, but consuming, demanding, the kind of kiss that erased everything that came before it. He lifted her easily, and her legs wrapped around him as he carried her to the bed, laying her down against cool sheets that did nothing to calm the fire burning through her veins. His fingers found the zipper at the back of her dress. "These zippers," he muttered against her throat, a ghost of his usual smirk playing at his lips. Always in the way. The fabric slipped away, and Angela felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with nakedness, but when his gaze traveled over her, there was nothing but reverence in his eyes. Wonder, almost, like he couldn't believe she was real. "I've been waiting for this," he whispered, his lips tracing a path from her collarbone to the hollow of her throat. "Since the moment I saw you in that wedding dress." His touch was fire. Everywhere his hands moved, her skin ignited, every nerve ending screaming with sensation. Angela arched into him, her fingers digging into the muscles of his back as coherent thought dissolved into pure feeling. His hands were everywhere, her waist, her hips, the curve of her spine, and Angela stopped thinking. "Look at me." Raphael breathed to her lips. She did. Those eyes burned into hers, stripped her bare, saw everything she'd been hiding. "This isn't just tonight," his voice was raw. "You understand that? After this you're mine. No one else. Ever." Angela's answer was to pull him into her. That was all the permission he needed. "No, don't close your eyes." Raphael's voice was gravel and smoke. "I want to see your eyes when you become mine. When I'm inside you, I want you to feel every second of this." When they finally came together, Angela understood why people called this making love, because it wasn't just pleasure. It was surrender, trust, something that couldn't be undone. The initial sting melted into something deeper, fuller, a sensation that built and built until she thought she might shatter. He was gentle when she needed gentle, fierce when she needed more. He watched her face like her expressions were the only thing in the world that mattered, adjusting to every gasp, every sigh, every whispered word. His hands gripped her hips, guiding her rhythm, his forehead pressed against hers as their breath mingled. And when release finally crashed through her, she cried out his name, the first time she'd said it without anger, without fear, without pretense. Just his name, just him. Her sounds melted into his, gasps and groans blurring into one. They fell asleep tangled together, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. Angela woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments, the warmth of the body beside her, the soreness in muscles she'd never used, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. She lifted her head and looked at him. Asleep, Raphael looked younger than 38. The sharp edges of his face softened, the perpetual tension in his jaw released. He looked almost peaceful, almost human, like a sculpture carved by someone who understood beauty required vulnerability. Her fingers drifted to his face without permission, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his cheekbone, the corner of his mouth. "Is this love?" The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. This is what love feels like. This consuming, terrifying, overwhelming thing I've never felt before. Raphael's eyes opened. Before she could react, he moved, one fluid motion that flipped her onto her back with him above her, pinning her wrists together above her head. The playful smile on his face was new, softer than his usual smirk. "My little dove." He lowered his mouth to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "You know I never let go of what's mine. You understand that now, don't you?" Angela's body arched toward him instinctively, a soft sound escaping her lips. "I'm here because I chose to be." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Remember that." Raphael smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "That doesn't change the fact that you're mine now, Angela." He kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "And now, we're not leaving this bed until evening, because I want to memorize every inch of you." Angela melted into him, let herself be consumed by his touch, let pleasure wash away everything else. But even as she lost herself in his arms, one thought remained, stubborn and persistent at the back of her mind. When do I tell him the truth? The question had no answer, not yet. They stayed in bed until evening, the world outside their door forgotten. Raphael lay behind her, one arm draped across her waist, his lips brushing the curve of her shoulder. Angela's body still hummed with the aftershocks of pleasure, every nerve ending oversensitized, aware of every place their skin touched. I didn't know I could want someone this badly." The words were a whisper against her ear, his breath warm on her neck. Angela turned in his arms to face him, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his chest. "Have there been many?" She kept her voice light, but something tightened in her stomach. "Women, I mean." Raphael kissed her lips, slow, unhurried. "I'm 38, Angela. Of course there have been." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "But none like you." "What do you mean, like me?" "Innocent." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Natural. Defiant. Someone I couldn't bring myself to break." Angela's chest constricted at his words. She looked up at him, vulnerability cracking through her carefully constructed walls. "I don't know you, Raphael." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "That scares me." He gathered her closer, his hand smoothing down her hair in a gesture so tender it made her throat ache. "I won't let anyone hurt you, little dove." Angela searched his eyes, those pale blue depths that revealed nothing and everything at once. "Even yourself?" Raphael went still. For several heartbeats, he simply looked at her, something shifting behind his gaze that she couldn't name. Then he kissed her, deep, consuming, his answer pressed against her lips. "Even myself." The restaurant was all glass and candlelight, perched on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean. Monaco's elite filled the tables around them, diamonds glittering, laughter polished and practiced. Raphael's hand found hers as they walked through the entrance, his fingers interlacing with hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Angela's mind raced even as her body leaned into his warmth. "What is this? What are we?" She felt special beside him, more special than she'd ever felt with anyone. Part of her still feared him, still remembered the cold authority in his voice when he'd ordered men dragged away. But another part, growing louder by the hour, craved his touch like oxygen. The investors rose to greet them with warm words and polished smiles. Julian kissed her cheek with genuine warmth. "Angela, lovely to see you again. You made quite the impression in New York." The table was lively, champagne flowing, business talk mingling with gossip about Monaco's social scene. Women at adjacent tables kept glancing at Raphael, their interest obvious, and Sophie, Julian's wife, leaned toward him more than once with her décolletage on display. But Raphael's eyes never strayed from Angela. His hand remained on her waist, her thigh, her shoulder, constant, claiming, present. He didn't spare the other women a single glance. "He sees only me." The realization warmed something deep in her chest. "This man values me." "Raphael, your girlfriend is awfully quiet." Sophie's voice cut through the chatter, her smile sharp as glass. "But she's very lovely. You chose well." She turned to Angela, her tone softening just a touch, condescending, honeyed. "Sweetheart, I hope all this technical talk isn't boring you." Angela straightened in her chair. She returned the smile, but hers was cool, deliberate. "Actually, not at all." Her voice was calm, measured. "I'm listening with interest. And if anyone asked for my opinion, I'd give it. I just chose not to interrupt. This is Raphael's territory." She paused, holding Sophie's gaze without flinching. "And your comment about me being chosen is interesting." The table seemed to hold its breath. "Do you believe women wait to be chosen? Or did you say that because I'm younger?" Sophie's perfectly painted lips parted, but no words came. "Because from where I'm standing," Angela added, her voice steady, unshaken, "if a woman doesn't choose first, no man gets to claim he's done the choosing." Silence settled over the table like a velvet curtain falling. Angela felt Raphael's gaze on her, sharp, assessing. She glanced at him and caught it, that familiar hint of a smile touching the corner of his mouth, his eyes narrowed with something that looked dangerously close to admiration. It gave her courage. Julian chuckled, breaking the tension. "She has a point, Sophie." He raised his glass toward Angela. "And truthfully, this young woman is the reason we're all sitting here. Her idea in New York convinced me this partnership was worth pursuing." Raphael lifted Angela's hand from the table and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles while his eyes held hers. "Angela is a cook." Pride colored his words. "And an exceptional one. She will be a chef soon." Julian's interest visibly increased. "Is that so? We're opening several restaurants in the coming year. Perhaps we could discuss working together." "We'll be competitors in that arena, Julian." Raphael's voice was polite, but firm, his gaze cutting to the older man with unmistakable warning. "And I don't intend to lose my girlfriend to the competition." Angela's cheeks flushed hot. "He called me his girlfriend. His, not his prisoner, not his hostage. His girlfriend. But is there a difference with a man like Raphael?" Later that night, in his room, the city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Angela straddled his lap as his hands roamed her bare skin. "I was proud of you tonight." His voice was rough, his breath uneven against her neck. "The way you handled that woman. Quick, sharp. You put her right in her place." Angela smiled, rolling her hips in a way that made his jaw clench. "She deserved it." "That line about choosing—" He pulled her closer, his mouth finding the hollow of her throat. "I never looked at it that way before." Angela tangled her fingers in his hair, tilting his face up to meet her eyes. "You may have taken me, Raphael." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But I'm the one who opened that door. I'm the one who walked into your room. Don't forget that." Something dark and hungry flared in his gaze. In one fluid motion, he flipped her onto her back, pinning her beneath him. His mouth traced down her body, pausing at her breasts, and he looked up at her through hooded eyes. "Maybe you're not as naive as I thought, little dove." Angela arched into his touch, a moan escaping her lips as pleasure sparked through every nerve. "I'm not," she thought, even as coherent thought began to dissolve, "and you have no idea what I'm capable of." But that truth could wait. Tonight, there was only this, only him, only the fire consuming them both. The private jet cut through the clouds, Monaco falling away behind them. Angela sat close to Raphael, her head resting against his shoulder as the Atlantic stretched endlessly below. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, then her wrist, then the inside of her palm. From the galley, Linda the flight attendant watched them with barely concealed jealousy, her perfectly painted smile tightening at the edges every time Raphael touched Angela. Let her look, Angela thought. He's mine now. "Tell me about your family." She traced idle patterns on his forearm. "I've told you about mine, but you've never talked about yours." Raphael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he spoke. "My father was a hard man. Discipline, that's what he taught me. Control. The business came first, always." His voice was even, measured, like he was reciting facts rather than memories. "He died 5 years ago." "And your mother?" Something shifted in his eyes, a crack in the armor she rarely saw. "Cancer. I was 18. He paused, and when he continued, his voice had softened. "She was my best friend. The only person in my family who understood me." Angela's chest constricted at the rawness in his words. She squeezed his hand tighter. "I took over the family business after my father passed. Uncles, cousins. They didn't make it easy. Too many opinions, too much ambition." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Oscar is the only one I trust completely. He's a distant cousin, but we grew up together. He's been by my side since we were kids." "And the restaurants, the nightclubs?" Raphael turned to look at her, his pale blue eyes holding hers with unsettling intensity. "When you operate in that world, you deal with dangerous people. And to survive dangerous people, you have to be more dangerous than they are." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "That's the nature of the business." Silence stretched between them. Angela's stomach churned with the question she'd been holding back for weeks. "Raphael," her voice came out smaller than she intended. "My father. How did he steal from someone like you? And why?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to the window, watching the clouds drift past. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but heavy, not accusatory, just factual. "Because your father wasn't afraid of me." Angela turned to face him fully, her brow furrowing. "He wasn't my enemy, Angela." Raphael's eyes found hers again. "He was by my side. He stole from the inside." The words landed like a physical blow. Ice water flooded her veins. "Men like your father don't steal out of greed," Raphael continued, his tone almost clinical. "They steal out of panic, out of desperation, out of a need to save someone they love." Angela's throat tightened around unshed tears. "But understand this," his voice dropped, carrying the weight of absolute truth. "Even if he did it to save you, in my world, that's still betrayal." Her eyes stung. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Raphael's voice softened unexpectedly. "But that doesn't make you guilty." She turned back, startled by the gentleness in his tone. "You weren't part of that chain," he said. "You didn't touch that money. As long as that's true, you're innocent." He paused, something unreadable passing through his expression. "Your father kept you ignorant on purpose, because if you'd known, you wouldn't have survived." Angela swallowed hard, pressure building behind her eyes. "Stealing that money was easy," Raphael added quietly. "What was hard was not touching it for 2 years." He watched her with something that looked almost like respect. "That's why you're still here. Either you had no idea the money existed, or you knew and chose not to use it." Tears blurred her vision. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Is that the only reason I'm still here?" Raphael reached out, tilting her chin up with gentle fingers, forcing her to meet his eyes. "And because I love you, Angela Fiore." His voice was rough, stripped bare of its usual control. "Despite who your father was. Despite everything." A tear slipped down her cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb. When they pulled up to the estate, Maria opened the front door with wide eyes. She glanced at Oscar in the garden, gesturing subtly toward the couple walking up the path. "Something's different about them," she murmured when Oscar approached. He bit into his sandwich, watching Raphael's hand rest possessively on the small of Angela's back. "Resisting Raphael is hard," he said with a knowing grin. Then he slid a sideways glance at Maria. "Just like resisting me is hard." Maria rolled her eyes and walked back toward the kitchen without a word. Oscar sighed. "One day, Maria. One day." The week that followed felt like a dream Angela was afraid to wake from. She worked in Raphael's restaurant every day, developing the pastry menu, her hands covered in flour and sugar. For the first time in her life, her work felt like art, valued, respected, important. Raphael moved her things into his bedroom. The massive walk-in closet now held her clothes alongside his, plus dozens of new pieces he'd bought for her. That night, he carried her across the threshold like a bride, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "This is our room now. I don't want you even one door away. We sleep together, every night." Warmth bloomed in her chest like sunrise. He gave her a phone, her own, unrestricted. She called Miranda immediately. "Angie!" Miranda's voice crackled with relief. "Where the hell have you been? Everyone in Charleston is losing their minds." "I'm okay," Angela smiled, leaning against the window. "I'm with Raphael. I'm safe. I'm happy." Miranda paused for a second. "The man who took you from your wedding?" "He didn't take me, Miranda. He saved me. I'll tell you later." Angela's voice steadied. "Tell my boss I'm sorry, but I'm living in New York now." In the garden the next afternoon, Oscar sat beside Angela on the stone bench, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm trying to lose weight for her," he muttered, staring at the sandwich in his hands. "I know I'm ugly. A beautiful woman like Maria. What would she want with me?" Angela swatted his arm, unable to suppress a smile. "Oscar, I think Maria likes you. She's just playing hard to get." She raised an eyebrow. "And let's be honest, you're not actually dieting. You just like saying the word. Meanwhile, your hands are full of sandwiches and pastries." Oscar looked down at his sandwich, then back at Angela. "Valid point. Go tell her how you feel. Stop hovering around her and just be direct." He considered this for a long moment, then nodded with newfound determination. That evening, Angela found Raphael in his study, the blue glow of his computer illuminating his sharp features. "Come here, little dove." He pushed back from the desk, holding out his hand. "It's been 2 hours since I've seen you. I missed you." She went to him, her fingers threading through his dark hair as he pulled her onto his lap. "Raphael." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I need to go to Charleston." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll take you myself. We'll fly out, get your things, let you see your friends." His hand traced up her spine. "And then we'll come home." Home. The word settled into her bones like it belonged there. 2 days later, the private jet touched down in Charleston. Angela's heart raced as familiar streets rolled past the car window. She'd been gone almost a month, but it felt like a lifetime. Strange how this city that had always been home now felt like someone else's memory. Outside her apartment building, Raphael stopped the Mercedes, but made no move to get out. "You're not coming up?" He shook his head. "Take as much time as you need. This is your space. I'll wait here." She leaned across the console and kissed him, soft, lingering, grateful. Upstairs, Miranda nearly tackled her at the door. "Angie!" Tears streamed down her friend's face. "I was so worried." They spent an hour catching up, laughing, crying, packing Angela's belongings into boxes. Every few minutes, Angela found herself drifting to the window, watching Raphael's car parked down the street. "Girl," Miranda's voice was knowing, "you're in love with him." Angela turned, heat rising to her cheeks. "That gorgeous man who dragged you out of your wedding?" Miranda shook her head in disbelief. "I mean, he scared the hell out of all of us. But honestly, he saved you from Johnny. That guy was a leech," she grinned. "So maybe getting kidnapped was the best thing that ever happened to you." Angela laughed, but the sound was soft, almost reverent. "I do love him," she admitted. "Under that cold exterior, behind all the dangerous things he does. He's passionate, possessive, but he shows his love. He makes me feel like I matter." Miranda pulled her into a hug. "Then go get your man, Angie." Angela turned to gather the last of her things, but before she left, she paused at her nightstand. Her fingers found the familiar groove of the drawer. Inside, beneath her old music box, was a hidden compartment. She lifted the false bottom and pulled out a folded envelope. Her hands trembled as she tucked it into her pocket. Dread pooled in her stomach like cold water. Maybe I'll lose him, she thought, pressure building behind her eyes. Maybe this will destroy everything. But she couldn't keep lying. Not anymore. Without looking back, Angela walked out of the apartment and toward the waiting car. Toward Raphael. Toward the truth. Angela slid into the passenger seat, her backpack clutched against her chest. Raphael sat behind the wheel, but something was off. His jaw was tight, his gaze distant, fixed on some point beyond the windshield. His hands gripped the steering wheel like he was bracing for impact. "Thank you," she said softly, leaning over to press a kiss to his cheek. "For bringing me here. For waiting." He turned, and a small smile ghosted across his lips. He nodded, but said nothing. Angela studied his profile, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed against the leather. "Is something wrong?" "No." His voice was measured, controlled. "There's one more place I want to take you before we leave." The envelope in her pocket seemed to burn against her thigh. All through packing, all through saying goodbye to Miranda, she'd been rehearsing how to give it to him. What to say, how to explain. "Tell him now," her mind urged. "Just tell him." But the words wouldn't come. The car wound through Charleston's historic streets until they reached Waterfront Park. The late afternoon sun cast golden light across the harbor, and the famous pineapple fountain sparkled in the center of the promenade. Raphael parked and walked around to open her door. He took her hand. his palm warm and steady against hers, and led her toward the fountain. Couples strolled past. Children chased each other across the grass. The air smelled of salt and possibility. They stopped at the water's edge, the fountain's gentle spray catching the light like scattered diamonds. Raphael turned to face her. His pale blue eyes held an intensity she'd never seen before, vulnerable, almost uncertain. "Angela," his voice was low, rough. "You've been with me for 6 weeks, but I've known about you much longer than that." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I spent 2 years looking for you. After your father died, you disappeared. No trace, no trail." He paused, something flickering behind his gaze. "When I finally found you, I had you followed for 3 months before I made my move." Her breath caught. "I know what time you wake up," he continued. "Who you spend time with. Where you disappear to when you're hurting." His jaw tightened. "I know the bench you sat on for 3 hours the day your father died. I know you, Angela." She couldn't speak. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "There were reasons I wanted you near me. The debt. The money." He stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her face. "But there's something else. Something that has nothing to do with any of that." He reached into his jacket pocket. "I love you." The words came out raw, stripped of all pretense. "I want you with me. Always. At my side, in my bed, in my restaurant, everywhere." He lowered himself to one knee. Angela's hand flew to her mouth. Shock rippled through her, scattering her thoughts like dropped marbles. He opened a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring caught the fading sunlight, huge, flawless, breathtaking. "Marry me." For a moment the world stopped. The fountain's spray seemed frozen in mid-air. Everything narrowed to just him, just this, just the impossible question hanging between them. A smile trembled across her lips. Joy and terror warred inside her chest. But Raphael wasn't finished. "This isn't pressure," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm giving you a choice. A real one. You can say no, stay here, live your life, and I'll fly back to New York alone." A muscle worked in his jaw. "It'll break me, but at least I'll know you had an out." The envelope in her pocket pressed against her hip like a stone. Tears blurred her vision. She looked down at the ring, at the diamond blazing in the fading light, and something cracked open inside her chest. She closed the box. "Raphael." Her voice broke on his name. "Please, stand up." He rose slowly, confusion clouding his features. They stood face to face. Angela took the box from his hands and pressed it back against his chest. "Thank you for giving me a choice." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But my answer is no." His face went blank. Then pain flashed across it, quick, devastating, barely contained. "I thought we were in love." His voice was quiet, dangerous in its stillness. "I can't marry you." The words tore out of her, ragged and raw. "Not like this." "What does that mean?" His eyes narrowed, searching her face. "Not like this." Angela's fingers trembled as she touched his jaw, tracing the sharp line of bone beneath his skin. "I want to stay here, Raphael." Her voice cracked. "You said I had a choice. This is my choice." "Why are you crying?" His hand caught hers, holding it against his face. "Angela, tell me what's happening." She couldn't answer, not without destroying everything. So instead, she kissed him, pouring every word she couldn't say into his mouth, every apology, every confession, every goodbye she didn't have the courage to speak out loud. When she pulled away, his eyes were still closed. Oscar stood by the Mercedes, his massive frame leaning against the hood. His eyebrows shot up as Angela sprinted toward him, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed her backpack from the back seat, then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled envelope. "Give this to Raphael," She pressed it into Oscar's hands. "But only when you're in the air. Promise me." Oscar's face creased with confusion. "Angela, I thought you two loved each other." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. "It's complicated, Oscar." Before he could respond, she turned and ran, away from the car, away from the park, away from the man still standing by the fountain with an empty ring box in his hands. Raphael didn't move for a long time. He stood at the water's edge, staring out at the harbor as the sun sank below the horizon. The only woman he'd ever truly wanted had just walked away from him, and he had no idea why. The private jet climbed through the clouds, New York bound. Raphael sat in silence, his gaze fixed on nothing. The ring box sat unopened on the table beside him. Oscar approached, his footsteps heavy on the cabin floor. "Boss?" He held out the crumpled envelope. "I promised Angela I'd give this to you once we were airborne." Raphael took it without a word. The paper was worn, creased from being folded and refolded too many times. Inside he found two things, a small flash drive and a handwritten letter. He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar, not Angela's. "Angela, my beautiful girl, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I neglected you for years, on purpose. Men in my line of work don't get to have families. I kept you and your mother at arm's length to keep you safe. If I'd stayed close, you would have been a target. On the flash drive, you'll find a bank account in the Cayman Islands. It's in your name, more money than you'd ever need. You know this money isn't clean, but I'm leaving it to you because I need to know you'll be okay when I'm gone. I can't tell you what to do with it. I can only tell you this. If you dig into where it came from, people will come for you. If you don't touch it, maybe you'll be safe. If you do touch it, the consequences are yours to decide. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just live a better life than I did." Raphael closed his eyes. "Little dove," he murmured, the words barely a whisper. "You knew all along." A small, painful smile curved his lips. She hadn't run because she didn't love him. She'd run because she did. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of Angela and Raphael's story. Part 1 ends here, but the story, it's just beginning. In part 2, Raphael discovers what Angela has been hiding for 2 years. A secret from the past threatens to destroy everything, and a choice that will change both their lives forever. Will they find their way back to each other? Or is this goodbye? Part 2 arrives in 3 days, but I need to know, are you coming back? Please comment Part 2 below. You can rate the story from 1 to 10, and if you felt something, anything, leave a like. Do Angela and Raphael deserve their happy ending? Tell me what you think. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. See you in Part 2.